Hello and welcome to another edition of Focus, a program produced by the Department of Disaster Management. I'm your host, Information and Education Manager at the DDM, Philomena Robertson. Thank you for joining us. Today's program is on International Day for Disaster Reduction, IDDR. Observed on October 13th every year, IDDR is set aside by the United Nations to celebrate how people are reducing their risk to disasters and to raise awareness about the importance of disaster risk reduction. This year, the theme focused on Resilience is for Life, and it sought to highlight the need for a more inclusive approach for older persons in disaster risk reduction, as well as recognize the critical role that they can play in resilience building through their vast knowledge and experience. In observance of IDDR, the DDM embarked on a number of initiatives, including a survey to determine the level of awareness and disaster preparedness among older persons, and the redesign and distribution of a brochure on disaster preparedness for the same target audience. The DDM also conducted site visits to the various community centers to engage persons attending the seniors program, where we shared disaster preparedness information with them and also encouraged them to share their past experiences with hazards. In fact, these experiences are the centerpiece of today's program. Although the BVI is vulnerable to many different hazards, including hurricanes, earthquakes, tsunamis, flooding, and landslides, hurricanes seem to be the hazard that the older persons we spoke to were most familiar with. Our first stop on the journey through Tortola was at the Carrot Bay Community Center, where Esme Stout, Melcina Smith, Eunice Cameron, and Aubrey Smith shared their experiences.
I didn't experience non-hurricane until Hugo in 1979, 89. But when I was a child, I know I born in 1925, and I understand it had one in 1920. It had 1916, it had 1924, and in 1928. It had one 1932. So I was a child then, and we didn't know nothing about hurricane, but all we were glad for the coconut them dropped down for we get coconut. But and in Hugo, when they say Hugo was coming, it was a Sunday afternoon. And my children, them said they ain't going to stay because I live near by the sea. And they said they ain't going to stay there and I must leave. So they leave before and tell me I must go to a neighbor. So I didn't leave right away, but I leave when the wind started to blow. And I was going up by a neighbor, not so far from me, little higher than up in the hill. And when I get there, I had some food. Remember that I had some food to take with me. And I forget it. And I turn back. Lord, I never be my death. When I get going up, we had some sandbox tree. And they start broken down over my head, and I just had to stand up still and wait till when the wind passed by. And after that wind passed by, then I went up by the neighbor. And that hurricane raged all night. All night. We didn't sleep at all, we and the neighbor, then just listening. And it raged all night, and when morning dawned, that you could have seen morning, it was in September. And when I went home by my house, before I reached to my house, we had some breadfruit trees and pear trees, and the pear trees, them had pear then and the breadfruit tree. And when we looked, the whole place was pear and breadfruit. I never see more breadfruit on the ground. And that they had breadfruit. The people then come the afternoon who were driving around to see how the other places were. They just pick up breadfruit and they went with them. And then my husband had to go cut down the trees and things for people to get to pass because the whole place was blocked up. The whole road was blocked up. That is my experience of Hugo. But thank God he was alive. We didn't lose nothing. We had some chairs in the porch, and we didn't pick them up. And the next morning when we wake up, them chairs was way down. How the wind take up them chairs out to the porch, it was mysterious to see that the wind could have taken up them chairs out to the porch and throw them such a distance. That is my experience of the Hugo.
I make sure I fill some buckets of water and some gallons of water because you never know when the current leave you out of water. So you try to get most of your containers filled with water. Even if you have the cistern, you don't have the current. So I fill a couple buckets of water and I make sure I had my flashlight batteries and I even have some small lights that I put on the table. I make sure that they were lit in right and I had every little necessity that I would need in case you couldn't get out for 2 or 3 days. All my medication, I know I had them refilled, and I had a lot of stuff at hand. I was trying to be prepared.
As you know, a mother in the home, she always have food. Maybe I did not have enough, so we hustled quick to go town. I tell the children, on your way coming home, pick up certain little things because we do not know how long this hurricane will come. And I make sure to tell them, go down by the hospital and ask if I could get about a dozen more glutamate tablets. That's my medication. If in case we can't get out, I will still have my medication. But thanks be to God, He loves us so that through the night, to be truthful, I did not sleep. Every minute I peeped into the window to see how outside looked. I said, but it's looking clear. It don't got no kind of darkness, and peeping. I keep the flashlight on my bed because I said, if in case Kawan go, the flashlight is right to my hand. But as I said, God is a good God. And listening to you all the time saying how close it is coming, how close it is coming, I said, Lord, it's getting me nervous. I don't want to hear him saying how close it is to us, So I stopped. I said, know something, God going to take care of us, especially you who don't have a husband. God going to take care of me and knowing how to 6 foot. As I even say, I run like people are going to run. I got to stay in put. But thank God. He spared us, and we do hope that we will always live to give God thanks the way He has treated us.
I was holding the sliding door, and the sliding door was moving back and forth. I was almost trying to go away from there. So my kids were there, my wife, and everything. Everybody was scared. So we held on all night, and I don't want to say anything like that. It was terrible. The next day, we went out and we looked at the place, and we had the roofs, houses, everything was there, just moving around, and we was there picking up stuff on the floor and everything, and it was terrible. I saw roof, and roofs from miles away came and dropped on other people's roof, and it just smashed out all of it. Then you had houses that you could have taken part of the houses and make house out of that because they float so far. And I still could hardly explain. But, so I got some experience about it.
At the Valerie O. Thomas Community Center in Seacoast Bay, we spoke to Varys Hodge, Ivor Todman, and Ruth Barry, who shared their experience with Hurricane Hugo.
Hugo was the first hurricane I saw a real experience. Before Hugo, people also in my age group, we were hoping to see a hurricane. After Hugo came, we don't want to see another. Because I didn't see one before, Hugo was very, very long to me. It started like Sunday afternoon, and all into Monday about 11 o'clock. It was still going. Maybe had worse than that, but I say my experience with Hugo was the worst I've ever seen. We didn't have too much rain, so we didn't lose many trees, but we lost the leaves from the trees. But there wasn't too many trees didn't get uprooted. but we had a lot of coconuts on the ground. Everything was blown out, but I suffered very little damage.
Well, it wasn't so much happened to us really. My husband was well bad up. He had water there and water up in the house. And whatever else he had need, he bring up there and prepare for. But not much didn't happen to us. After the hurricane passed that day, you could have looked anywhere and see all the houses you couldn't see before. You could have seen them. A lot of roofs and things was out, but it didn't do much to us. Really didn't do much to us. Well, some water did came in under the door. I had to remove the rug on the floor. I had to throw it away, you know. Yeah, but it didn't do much to us. Yeah.
And she called and she said, "Mammy, it have a storm coming." The first I experienced a storm was then. And one of my son, which was ill, went to take it up. He said, "You think hello Jamaica?" And I went and I said, "Hand me the phone." And I took it from me and I listened. She said, "Mammy, take a storm coming." I said, "Lord, just, I had no experience none yet in my life." But anyhow, I started preparing my coal, my kerosene oil, a coal pot, and my water.
At the East End Community Center, manager for the seniors, Miss Adina Penn, who is herself an older person, shared her experience of Hurricane Donna. Elmira Dawson also spoke to us about the experience after the eye of the hurricane passed.
As I remembered a little of Hurricane Donna, it was in the early 60s. As it was that Sunday afternoon, we were all at Sunday school, and we had to get home before it came in that night. And as far as I can remember, it did set in. It come from the north. And we had a flat roof house, galvanized. And through the night at some point in time, it just blew off the top of the house down in Mr. Crab land. And my uncle and his wife was there, and when they came over, they let us know that the house top has gone. And it was a very horrible experience for me at that time. But it was good, because we said that we wanted to see a hurricane, and it didn't have any for a long time. And that one had came, and we see what it was all about.
I remember preparing for this hurricane, and we boarded the house up. We buy a lot of canned stuff and get flashlights and things ready for the hurricane, because it was scheduled for the eye to pass right over us. And I can remember when it was passing, there was a strong wind, but not as we anticipated. And while we were there, the first part of it passed, the eye passed right over us. And after the eye passed, there was a calm. And I remember the sun came out bright, 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 and as though it was a bright sunny day. And I remember coming out on my gallery and looking around, and the place had looked so good. And I can remember Mr. Elton George speaking on the radio and asking people to get back into their houses, because this is just the tail is behind. But I couldn't understand what you were saying by the tail behind. And we still stayed outside, but then after a while we noticed that the wind began to pick up again. And then the heaviest part of the hurricane passed. And that is when I understand what they mean by when the eye passes over you. After the eye pass, there's a calm. And then when the tail comes, it's stronger than the first.
At the Brewers Bay Community Center, 5 seniors readily shared their experience. We spoke to Peggy Klein, Yvonne and Evadne Christopher, who are related by marriage. Thomas Smith, and Irene Parsons, the manager for the center, who herself is a senior.
I'm originally from the U.S., but I was living here during Hurricane Louis. And I remember that as just being a very terrifying evening for me. I remember it got very dark, lots of rain, and the wind. The wind was very, very strong. And I can remember that. I was living in Cane Garden Bay and was scared to death. I remember we had the radio was still on. The radio systems were still working. And we were keeping in tune with how the weather was going. But it was just a lot of rain, a lot of wind. The wind was what was the real scary part. I was living with a cousin. All I think I remember him doing was boarding up. I think that's what I remember him doing, boarding the windows, or at least some of them. For now, today, we have shutters on the house. And the other day when we had a hurricane scare, hurricane watch, I closed a couple of the shutters, the ones that would close.
I experienced the Maryland. I had to run to my daughter's house for shelter, but nothing ever happened to my house. I ran to my daughter, and there I was sheltered until it passed. It had a little thunder and rain and lightning, and we all couldn't go outside. We had to stay inside, and I was scared because I thought although the houses are downstairs, just a wall roof and everything, I was thinking about the shutters, if they go blow in or something like that. So, and we was in there until it passed.
I experienced Hugo hurricane. I was in St. Thomas. I remembered we had some high winds and water always also beat into the windows, so the house was like, it was flooded. Even though it was highly elevated, the water came through the windows, so we had a lot of water. I can remember Kenneth Mapp. I listened to the Sinclair radio station all night, and he was encouraging everyone to hunker down because the hurricane, instead of the hurricane was passing, it was like it, when you think the hurricane would pass, because they had given you a time when the hurricane would have passed, but then it only seemed that the hurricane gets stronger at that point. So he was encouraging everyone to hunker down and stay where you are and until it passes. And I remember the roof coming from all about. We don't know where this roof came from, but when we in the morning, when we look, when we get up, there was many roofs and things behind my house. And I could remember we was out of power we didn't get back power till in November. So we were out of power for all those months. And, we had to cook and we had to go back to the old days, cook on coal pots and, do whatever you had to do to survive. I also remember Hurricane Marilyn. I was in St. Thomas too. And that one was even worse than Hugo. Hugo did a lot more damage in St. Croix than it did in St. Thomas. And that was terrible. I can remember one time when something hit on top of my roof, my daughter screamed out. My husband, he had a little spirit. I don't know what you would call it, but I would say spirit. And every now and again, he'll go for a little drink, a little bit of it. Because, you wanted this thing to pass so bad. And when, in the morning, when they got up and they started to, go around and to see the damage, they came back because I still was so frightened that they went out, the boys went out, and when they came back, they said, "Mommy, you should see out there. You should see out there. You wouldn't believe it. You in here, you don't know what's happening out there." So there was 2 really bad hurricanes that I experienced. I wouldn't like to experience another one like any of those.
For Hurricane Hugo and Marilyn, we didn't have hurricane shutters, but now we have. I'm living in Tortola now, so we have hurricane shutters. So we close the hurricane shutters when we hear that a hurricane is coming. We also get food, and we get batteries and things for your radio, for your flashlights, and we, prepared. We get water and so.
Well, only I one alone was home at the time. I had newly come from St. Thomas there in the week, and I alone was home at that time. The family otherwise were in St. Thomas, and I alone was there, so I had to take it easy. To get a shelter, I had to go. I had a little apartment down below. I went down there, and I rescue myself there at the same time. All I have to do is prepare for it, whatever it is. If they find that the property is not capable enough for them to stay, try get to some other place that would be in a little safety affairs, Get to some shelter somewhere around.
I remember specifically Hurricane Hugo, Hurricane Marilyn, and quite a number of others. When hurricane is approaching, you prepare. You make sure you have enough food. You have a battery radio. You have extra batteries just in case, and you have you make sure you have your medication all fitted out and all together, so you can just grab. You pack a bag with simple stuff that you can use, and you make sure that you have food in your house, and you have flashlights. That's important, because when the current goes, I remember sometimes it goes for weeks, and you have to cook on charcoal. So you always have to keep charcoal on hand, because except you have a gas stove, which I was fortunate to have, so I could always use my gas stove. And you make sure you, if it's coming rear direct on you, you put on your hurricane shutters. If you don't have shutters, you put on take plywoods and bar up the windows so that the rain and the wind does not affect the inside. It is a very horrifying experience. I could remember with Marilyn, you could stay inside the house and you can hear the trees. You hear trees falling, breaking, and it's like when you're crushing. Sometimes it sounds like when you're crushing macaroni in your hand, and it was very frightening sometimes to go through a storm, the wind and the rain, and it goes for hours and hours and hours, and sometimes you are so thankful when it is over, and you make sure that when the wind stops, you open cautiously. I remember we had a downstairs, and just before when they gave the last one, and you would close up upstairs, and then you would go downstairs in that one particular room. I could remember with Marilyn one time I thought my roof was going. I sat in a room, and we closed the door, and it seemed as if the roof was lifting up. I hear all the screws and the nails moving, and I said, Lord, don't tell me my roof is going. And it's like the hand of God came and it put it back down. That was such an experience that I'd never want to experience that again, because I thought in the morning when I look up, I would see the sky. But God was good, and He brought us safely through that hurricane. And when I hear hurricanes coming now, I always make sure I have get all the things that I need and have them all handy. As a matter of fact, I keep things all the time, because sometimes you never know, the wind and everything just rises up. So you got to be prepared all the time, at all times.
At the Rotown Community Center, the seniors were a bit shy to be on camera, but were quite receptive to us sharing disaster preparedness information. The Rotown seniors also hosted an art and craft exhibition during October, and we were invited to visit. An invitation we happily accepted. We also took our camera to the streets of Road Town, but the older persons we encountered were reluctant to appear on camera. We did, however, get the views of Cassandra Sutton, who's not quite an older person yet, but she did have some hurricane experience to share.
When Hugo started, I was I was in town, you know, and coming on to on the waterfront drive, I had to turn in because when it started, the wind started so heavily, the sea started rolling. And then I headed straight by the hospital, and there they was trying to move the senior citizen and them upstairs and so and try to think. But it comes so sudden, you know. And then I asked one of the man, the maintenance man, if he could drop me home. And he said, okay. And he did drop me home. And man, I telling you, that was something. But nothing didn't happen to us, you know, but I was kind of like scared. And when it have hurricane, I can't sleep. I just have to stay up and, you know, peep out and, you know, kind of way turn up, you know what I mean? But I said she do a lot of damage. She was just like she pat, you know, picking out what house she want to go with, what house she want to go with and so. But nothing didn't happen to us, thank God, you know. But then with Marilyn, I live in my own house and I'm in a alley, I mean in a valley where trees, mango trees, all kind of big trees, you know, and still Marilyn, I hear like a rolling, and when I look, it's like something coming heavy, and when I peep, I see this half a roof coming from up, I believe it's up Mays or somewhere up there, Harrigan side, and it come right over my uncle's house and drop right in my yard. God is so good to don't let that roof drop on my house, you know. And then it had the other hurricane after that one. What name again? Louis. And the roof, just when I say I'm going to get somebody to move the roof, there this hurricane come right away, Louis, and take that roof and just straight over my house. You understand? I was so frightened. I had like 5 children at that time, and you know, they were small and thing, and then when one of them say, Mommy, the water coming in, like the garage like starting to lift up a little bit and water is coming down. So what we do, I shelter them in my room, and we went in the bathroom, some of us, you know, and we stay there and we pray to God, you know, that nothing don't happen worse, you know, and so, you know, but it didn't, it just a little part had come up, you know, and I was so frightened, and so, but through it all, everything was safe, thank God. But God is good all the time, okay? And then the one the other day, well, I slept. There's only a little cool little breeze. Thank God, God spare us, you know. We had some gardeners, and so my daughter, she building her house, and she tried to put them in the storeroom and thing, and so, you know, you can't have those kind of things, you know, around when, you know, hurricane, because it's dangerous, you know. And so, and we pray to God that it don't come heavily and damage us, and so God is good.
As we wrap up this program, we'd like to share some additional pictorials of persons who were reluctant to appear on camera, but they did share their stories off camera and agreed to be photographed. That brings us to the end of this edition of Focus. We certainly hope you enjoyed hearing the experiences of older persons with the hazards that they have experienced in the past. I am Philomena Robertson, Information and Education Manager at the DDM. Be sure to join us again next time.